Welcome to 200 Days of Stardew Valley Bingo Edition, starring Aubrey and Bingo, and introducing Ginger. We managed to get Bingo in the first 100 Days challenge, and if you haven't seen that video, I'd recommend checking it out. For this new challenge, I've removed the goals we already achieved and threw a few new ones into the mix. While most of the goals are self-evident, I do want to mention that cooking completion does not include the 3 recipes only available in winter of year 2, and the animal goals include everything except golden chickens, as you can't get them until after you achieve perfection. With all that out of the way, let's get back into our winter wonderland. Haley decided to start our new challenge off on the best foot by making me pancakes on the morning of day 101. To say I was disappointed in the state of my farm after that first 100 days would be an understatement, so to remedy this, I got to work organizing. I also cut down my outside fruit trees to expand my tree tapper farm. Today was the wizard's birthday, so that afternoon I was off to see the wizard to gift him a gold quality purple mushroom. Then I picked up the wizard's quest to slay ghosts for some ectoplasm. Partially because it was his birthday, but also because I ain't afraid of no ghosts. I rounded out the night by catching Willie a squid, and did some shopping for the final night of the night market. On day 102, I received a letter from Lewis letting me know that Caroline was my secret friend for the Feast of the Winter Star. I was kinda hoping for someone I had a low relationship with, but oh well. I did some work in my greenhouse expanding my strawberry field, before heading to the mines to hunt some ghosties for the wizard, and finding the ectoplasmic specter on a lovely frozen infested floor. Then I spent the rest of the evening working on my disheveled farm. On day 103, I continued to work on cleaning up my farm, stopping briefly to drop a few omni-geodes into the sturgeon pond, then handed the ectoplasm I'd collected last night over to our friendly tower dweller. Next, I stopped by Robin's to rearrange nearly every building, and I also commissioned my very first shed. While attempting to finally purchase the iridium rod, Gus and I learned the hard way that Willie had crabs. But I managed to purchase the rod from Willie and used it to haul up the legendary glacier— no wait, he got away. And again. Alrighty then, maybe another time. Feeling defeated, I went home to add more paths around my soon-to-be constructed shed. The next day was Evelyn's birthday, so I gifted her a diamond, then traveled to Ginger Island and decided to finally unlock the dig site. I set the professor free, apparently just in the nick of time. I feel bad for taking so long, but his name is Snail, so he must be accustomed to things moving slowly. I received a few golden walnuts for answering some trivia for Professor Snail, that I googled the answers for, of course, and explored the area north of the dig site, reaching a lovely total of 13 walnuts. I really wanted to unlock the island cabin, so I headed to the volcano where I managed to collect a total of 17 walnuts before passing out on floor 4. No cabin tonight, but I was now officially a level 10 miner, selecting the gemologist profession. When I woke up the next morning, I found a journal scrap in my backpack that would lead me to another walnut, and apparently Willie had to drag me back to the boat last night. Sorry, Willie. Robin requested that I bring her 10 pieces of hardwood, but the hardwood I currently had was intended for my next house upgrade. My shed was ready, so I started laying out my cakes in a convenient yet accessible pattern, before taking a trip back to Ginger Island to continue spelunking in the volcano. On floor 6, I came across a new mob that really burned me up, yet I managed to escape the volcano with the 20 walnuts needed to finally unlock the island hut. It felt rather strange waking up alone on the island that next morning, but I had a lot to do today and more time to do it in than usual, so I made my way straight to the volcano. I was on a mission today, a mission to reach the top, and just after 11, I'd made it to the 5th floor. Shortly after 6 p.m., I'd achieved my goal, scoring a few golden walnuts, a prismatic shard, and last but not least, marking off the first bingo spot of this new challenge. Next, I went to investigate the small cave that had opened up near my island hut. Inside was a ginormous frog who gave me 10 total walnuts for my melons and wheat growing on my tiny island farm. I headed home that night, happy with my progress so far, but knowing that I needed to get my farm in order by spring if I had any chance of meeting some of the more extravagant goals of this challenge. Today was Leah's birthday, so after taking care of farm chores, I headed over to see her and gift her a lovely piece of goat cheese, officially maxing out my hearts with Leah. I'd apparently maxed out hearts with Emily as well at some point. Later, I headed into town to drop off a prismatic shard for the missing bundle, had Clint crack open some geodes, and donated any new artifacts and gems to the museum. I spent the rest of that night placing pathing between my tapper trees and various farm beautification duties. Aw, look at Bingo keeping my side of the bed warm for me. On day 108, I decided today was the day I'd try again for the legendary glacier fish, since he can only be caught in the winter and time was running out. With the help of a fishing food buff, I managed to catch him lickety-split. Yay, my first legendary fish! That afternoon, I dropped off the caviar for the missing bundle, then headed up to Robin's to buy a stack of wood since her prices would be going up come spring. That night, I took to the mines to gather bug meat for a quest I'd picked up for Willie, and crafted a good quantity of tea saplings for the funds needed for my next house upgrade. Why, hello there, Santa! Today was the Feast of the Winter Star, so after doing some farm chores, I headed into town with a cup of tea for my secret friend Caroline. Then Willie gave me, dun-dun-dun, some magnet bait. I was kinda hoping for the tea set, but this is nice too. I made sure to talk to everyone before heading home for the night to place down pathing for my new storage area. Day 110 was a good humor day, and it was finally going to rain on the island tomorrow. I was also humorously close to the 50,000 needed for that house upgrade, so I made my way to Pierre's to sell some excess goods. It was Clint's birthday, but he was not in his shop. I managed to track him down in the community center to gift him a birthday topaz, before heading to Robin's to purchase that wondrous house upgrade. The rest of that day was spent traversing Skull Cavern in search of iridium and any other goodies I could get my hands on. The next morning, I filled in some more of my greenhouse and dropped by the albacore Gus had requested before heading back to Ginger Island for some rainy day walnuts. I harvested up a few walnuts with my parsnips and dug up another on the beach near Birdie's hut. I went to check the status of my walnut collection efforts and found that I was still 30 shy of entering the walnut room. I took to the volcano in search of more walnuts, but gave up rather quickly as there was little chance I'd earn all 5 walnuts needed to unlock the resort over the next few hours. At least fighting in the volcano let me reach level 9 combat. We are on the final day of winter, the final day of year 1. Checking in on our skills, we have only foraging and combat left before we max every one. Our star fruit is ready to harvest, yielding us the 3 walnuts left from farming on the island. Only 1 walnut to go before we can unlock the island resort. Can we get it from the beach mussels? Yes, we can! A bit of a shame we couldn't unlock the resort yesterday while it was raining, but at least it's done now. I decided to close down the resort for the first day of spring just in case Pierre got any funny ideas about taking a holiday tomorrow when I'd need seeds. Then I collected all of the available walnuts to the east of the resort, fishing up some additional walnuts and a few stingray in the process. I tooled around on the island for a bit until it was time for the pirates to inhabit their secret cove so that I could beat them at darts for a few more walnuts. With my new stash of walnuts, I unlocked the island trader. I headed home after a long day on the island. Robin was still hammering away on the side of the house. I wasn't sure how Bingo and Haley could sleep with all that noise Robin was making, but apparently Haley wasn't sleeping, because as soon as Robin finished upgrading the house, she asked if we should adopt a baby. We are now officially on track to have children before the 200 days are up. The spirits were in good humor on this first day of spring, year 2. And I guess Leah is an early riser because she made it there first to let me know she was having her art show in town this afternoon. Then Kent stopped by to introduce himself, and I received arguably the worst piece of mail in the entire game. I'd not been able to get as much iridium as I wanted, so I crafted as many quality sprinklers as I could before heading to Pierre's for some crop seeds. While in town, I checked out the special orders board and picked up Caroline's Island Ingredients quest to ship 100 pieces of ginger, and took a quick trip to Ginger Island to plant the garlic requested by the cave frog. Leah's art show was going on in town as I made my way back home, so it was pretty late by the time I returned and finished planting and watering my spring crops. The next morning, I planted some spring flowers over by the pond and finished up the pathing around my crop. I realized the animals were not contained, so I set about placing fences for their designated area. My first batch of shed wine was ready for collecting, and I added some additional kegs to fill with freshly picked strawberries. That night, Baba gave birth to little No-Wolf. The sturgeons requested a nautilus shell the next day, and I told Sam he should write a song about Atlantis. Planted some spring seeds in front of the house, then grabbed a stack of stone, some fiber, and 9 star fruit as I was off to see the wizard to build my very first Junimo hut. But I was a few thousand shy. Maybe tomorrow. I made a few tea saplings to ship off that night with the hopes of making the 7,000 needed for my friendly farm helper's home. though now I was out of the fiber needed. Whoops. That night I reached foraging level 10 and selected the botanist profession. Today was Kent's birthday, so I headed to his house, only to find that he was not home. I managed to track Kent down by the river to gift him a birthday egg and start on Birdie's quest chain. Kent gave me some gourmet tomato salt to bring to guests, who gave me a Stardew Valley rose to cart to the desert for Sandy, who gave me the advanced TV remote that I raced over to give to— oh, hi Alex. Anyhow, George gave me an Arctic shard in exchange for the remote, so I gave it to the wizard, who begrudgingly gave me a wriggling worm to get me to leave. By now it was close to 5, so I raced down to the ocean dock, but Willie had already closed up shop, so after trading Willie the worm for a pirate's locket, I made a mental note to finish up this quest chain back on Ginger Island another day. Before bed, I laid out some pathing for the area I hoped to place down a wonderful Junimo hut once my latest batch of fiber had grown. My fiber crop was ready that next morning, so I scythed it up, stopped quickly by the traveling cart to pick up a rare seed, then headed to the tower to build my very first Junimo hut. Next, I traveled to Ginger Island to work on my relationship with Luau. The garlic was ready, so I showed the cave frog my crops for another 5 golden walnuts, and I gave Birdie the pirate's locket for another 5. I was now only 4 walnuts shy of entering Mr. Key's secret room, so I stayed overnight in the hut with the hopes of finding the 4 walnuts needed the next day. I didn't find any more walnuts that next morning, but I grabbed some ginger for Caroline's quest before heading back to the valley and had Clint open up some artifact troves for the museum collection. That night, I crafted more kegs to expand my shed wine production capabilities. On that first Sunday in spring, I filled out my greenhouse with more ancient fruit before bringing Lewis a vegetable medley for his birthday and earning the beloved farmer achievement. Then I headed to Skull Cavern because it was a good luck day and I was in need of iridium. I made it to level 44 before deciding to call it for the night. As I was looking at my bingo card the next morning, I noticed that we already had 2 of the 5 spots needed for one of the bingo goals. So I got to work organizing ingredients I'd eventually need to cook every available recipe. I should probably note that every available recipe means every recipe with the exception of the poppy muffin, bruschetta, and shrimp cocktail, as I would not learn these recipes from the Queen of Sauce until winter after the 200 days were up. That afternoon, I cruised back over to the island to shimmy search for materials and collect more ginger for Caroline, before heading to the volcano in search of walnuts. Oof, still need 2 more. Most of my island crops were ready the next morning, so I set to work harvesting, before heading west to collect even more ginger. I had 20 days to harvest the remaining 50, so I think I can get there. I panned up the fossilized tail at the dig site, then made my way back to the farm and collected the crops the Junimos had collected for me. I love them so much, and not just because of the crop assistance. The rest of the night I spent organizing chests and gathering cooking ingredients to add to the fridge. Wednesday was Vincent's birthday, so after doing my farm chores, I grabbed a gold quality grape to bring to him. Vincent wasn't home, but I took the opportunity to grab the statue out of his toy chest. I stopped by the special orders board to choose between potatoes and potatoes. I chose potatoes. Then found the birthday boy hanging out by the river with Jas and Penny. I wanted to get more spring seeds, but got there just as Pierre was leaving. Apparently, you can't catch him on the way out like you can with Robin. Who knew? I'd need to harvest 100 potatoes over the next couple weeks, so I asked the Junimos not to harvest and gave them the friend I'd found in Vincent's room, before spending the evening foraging in the forest. On Thursday, after caring for my farm, I picked up a quest to bring Willie a ruby, then promptly forgot. I then made my way into Pierre's for a load of potato seeds. That afternoon, I headed to the island to plant some crops, and bought a mango sapling and banana pudding recipe from the island trader. I used some extra walnuts to build the bridge inside the volcano, then spent the rest of the night treasure hunting until I found just enough walnuts to enter Mr. Key's walnut room. And you know, I couldn't resist accepting the Danger in the Deep quest and checking the perfection tracker. 36% is pretty good for day 123, right? I spent the next morning searching for ginger since I still had 40 to collect. Once back home, I planted the mango sapling in the greenhouse, then brought a jar of dino mayo over to the missing bundle, before donning my helmet and preparing to enter the danger mines. The mines were slow going, and I only made it to level 10 before calling it for the night. Just like Baba the sheep had done, my only goat Billy somehow gave birth, and I named the new goat Millie. A quarter of the way through this challenge brings us to the Year 2 Egg Festival. So after chatting with everyone, I let the kids win the... I followed the same route and won the egg hunt because, well, I like gold. It was late when I returned home, so I spent some time on the farm crafting recipes for my completion goal. It was my lovely wife's birthday on day 126, and she made me some fresh bread. Later that morning, I made sure to bring her an iridium quality coconut before making my way to the rainy island for some harvesting. Then headed to the beach to complete the Mermaid's Walnut Challenge, completed the snake in the field office, and collected more ginger for Caroline's special order. I needed Gus to come to the island at some point so that I could purchase a recipe and maybe a bottle of quality wine, so I reopened the beach resort. I felt bad that I was spending Haley's birthday night on the island, but felt even worse when I got the notification that our baby girl had been delivered overnight. I named her Ginger because, well, sometimes I'm not so creative. It was Monday when I woke up on the island the next day, so I headed over to the Walnut Room and selected the Skull Cavern Invasion quest from Mr. Key. Though my ability to complete this quest was questionable, I knew I'd need to purchase the tropical curry recipe from Gus at the beach resort, so I hung out on the island until the Stardew residents arrived to see if he would come. But he did not. Maybe another day. Then I headed back to town to pick up the Prismatic Jelly quest from the Special Orders board, before heading home to hold my daughter Ginger for the very first time. But she was asleep. Then I headed to the mines in search of the Prismatic Jelly requested by the wizard. Completion of this quest would grant me access to the Monster Musk recipe that I needed for crafting, as well as being an item that would help me more quickly finish all the monster eradication goals. On day 128, I had a wine batch completed, so I refilled the kegs with strawberries, before taking a ride around Cindersnap Forest in search of salmon berries and forageables. That night, I headed to visit Krobus and caught a rather upsetting scene between him and the dwarf. I hate seeing these two fighting. Luckily, the wizard swooped in to end the conflict, and I was able to purchase a void egg and some recipes from Krobus without further incident. Back on the farm, I placed the void egg in the incubator to hatch a mysterious new chicken friend. It was finally raining on day 129, which meant I could try for the fish who eluded me the spring of the first 100 days, the legend. I chowed down on a tasty dish of the sea before setting out for my day's mission of catching that elusive beast. I managed to catch the legend within the hour, even snagging a few magma geodes from a treasure chest he'd brought up with him from the depths of the lake. My fishing buff was still active, so I decided to try for the void salmon needed for the missing bundle as well as fishing completion, and was able to haul that fish up in a few hours' time. Then did a cheeky side quest to fish up the ornate necklace from the bathhouse fountain. Wasn't sure yet if I would give this to Caroline or Abigail, but it would probably be Abigail since I think I have lower hearts with her and she gives more friendship points for returning the necklace. I was on a fishing roll, so I grabbed the slime jack from the mutant bug lair before dropping off the void salmon for the missing bundle. Now I'd need either a silver quality wine or I could use 5 gold quality ancient fruit. Which do you think I'll acquire first? By day 130, I had at least 10 hearts with 8 villagers, and a few more of the bachelors at max heart. Also, can I just say that I love the money box mechanic in place when some of the vendors are visiting the island? If I had known this, I wouldn't have had to shut down the island the first day of spring when I thought Pierre might leave me high and dry without seeds. Unlike Pierre, Robin was in her shop, and I decided today was the day I'd splurge on the final house upgrade. So yeah, my wallet was now 100,000 gold lighter. Then I spent the evening diving in the mines in search of the prismatic jelly for the wizard's quest, and while I didn't find the jelly, I did snag a prismatic shard off a very fortuitous bat around midnight. The next morning, I handpicked some potatoes for a quest before letting the Junimos harvest any other completed crops. Then ran around town handing out gifts to raise relationships further. Ironically, Kent told me that his wife hates daffodils, and that is what I was bringing him because he actually likes them. After passing out my gifts in town, I headed over to the island to harvest crops waiting there, found the mummified frog hiding in the grass, placed a banana on the shrine for 3 more golden walnuts, and gave Leo a duck feather I'd been saving for him. Not surprisingly, Leo was the character I had the least hearts with at the moment. I wanted to see if Ginger would be alert tomorrow, so I made my way back home that night. But she was still a sleepy little burrito the next morning. After doing some farm chores, I had Clint open a few dozen geodes, and commissioned my pickaxe be upgraded to iridium. Since today was Shane's birthday, I went looking for him, but he was not home, and he was not in the community center, though isn't it so cozy in here now? I ended up finding him hanging out at the saloon, and in hindsight, this should have been the first place I checked. Back at home, I placed some of my special fish into a tank before heading to bed. I started the next day off in a bigger house with some lovely casks in the basement that I placed wine into to begin the aging process. It was Sunday, so gift giving had reset for the week, and I continued my mission of befriending everyone for most of the day. And now only Kent and Leo were below 5 hearts. The next day was dark, dank, and dreary, and I was still sitting at level 9 combat, so I figured I should pick up the Juicy Bugs quest for Willy. I decided to give Abigail the necklace I'd fished out of the fountain and actually caught her on the way to the island. Hope Caroline didn't see that from around the corner. My main goal on the island today was picking up another key quest and harvesting the remaining ginger Caroline had requested. Here we go, Danger in the Deep Take 2. Though I had 7 days this time instead of the 4 days for completion on my last attempt. I turned in the fossilized skull to Professor Snail, so now the only piece missing was the fossilized spine that a quick search on Wiki showed I could dig up on the southern beach or fish up in the dig site river. Haley asked if I'd been practicing for the flower dance the next morning, and I didn't have the heart to tell her she might not be my partner this year. You see, dancing with someone grants 250 points of friendship, a full heart, so it'd be most beneficial for me to dance with the bachelor I had the lowest relationship with, really hoping this wasn't Alex so that Haley could still at least participate in the dance. It was a wine day, so I replaced all the strawberries in the kegs and added some new kegs to fill out the shed. Then tentatively checked out my bachelor heart situation. Phew, Sebastian was the lowest, so I wouldn't even have to contemplate taking Haley's partner for the dance, since I know how much the flower dance means to her. A new void chicken hatched, and I named it Obsidian, and I made a stop by Clint's to pick up my iridium axe, then took to the danger mines to work on both Key and Willie's quests. I'd forgotten to don my helm, so I only made it to level 10 before it was time to head home. And yes, the missing helm was certainly the reason progression was slow. I'm sure it had nothing to do with my lack of skill. As I passed by the southern edge of town, I realized I was in the right location and time to catch a cheeky little rendezvous between Lewis and Marnie, so I triggered it. It was the day of the flower dance. After I took care of some regular farm chores and took a rabbit's foot over to the Joja truck for a special charm, I headed on down to the dance to purchase the Tub of Flowers recipe, talked to everyone in attendance, then asked if Sebastian would be my dance partner for that extra friendship bump. Instead of dancing with my wife, I danced next to Haley, which was almost as good, and I've got to say, her head adornment might have been slightly better than mine. Just slightly though. I'd finished the potato shipment request overnight and received a mini shipping bin from Lewis that next morning. Then commissioned another pond be built by Robin so that I could work on the aged roe needed for shipping completion. Next, I stopped into Sebastian's room. Dancing with him yesterday had given me the 6 hearts needed for one of my favorite heart events in the game. I became a powerful wizard and managed to finish the scenario with an A rating. I ran into another heart event, this time with Shane, a bit later on that afternoon, and am so excited that I now have access to blue chickens. I named my first one Bonnie, and now have only the ostrich left to go before I can cross the Tier 2 animal bingo spot off my list. That afternoon, I headed over to Ginger Island and got my very first heart event with Leo. I spent some time fishing in the dig site that night and managed to pull up the fossilized spine, fully completing the field office fossils and receiving the ostrich incubator recipe along with 6 golden walnuts. I completed the island ingredient request overnight, so I'd no longer have to dig up every piece of ginger I saw. But I only had 3 more days to make it 110 levels in the mine and find 85 more pieces of bug meat. I decided to fish on the island while waiting for the valley residents to show up in the morning, just hoping that Gus would come. And even though it appeared to be a guy's day out, sadly Gus was not among them. Once back in the valley, I gifted Pierre a birthday daffodil and took care of farm chores for the rest of the night. My greenhouse had produce ready on day 139, so after harvesting and more farm chores, I gifted my sister-in-law a topaz for her birthday. Then dropped off the gold quality ancient fruit I'd plucked from the greenhouse, finally completing the missing bundle, letting the final Junimo return to his home. So now I guess the only Junimos left in the valley are the ones on my farm. I donned my squire's helm in an attempt to rush the final 100 plus levels of the mine, and made it all the way to level 17 until I gave up and headed home. That night, I saw the last Junimo Dance of Magic as they transformed the old Joja Mart into the marvelous new movie theater for the town. It's the final day of spring, and I'm not sure if the spouse dialogue is random or if this is a Haley joke, but she seems keen on watering the crops for me on the final day of a season. Emily invited me to Lewis's for a little clothing therapy, and I vaguely remember this event being both hilarious and uncomfortable at the same time. My second fish pond was complete, so I grabbed a super cucumber from the tank and tossed it in to start rowing. Then I was in for a night of comic relief at the fashion show. I decided to build another shed instead of upgrading the current one since I had the space picked out and it was actually cheaper and only resulted in a few less available keg spots. The movie theater was up, and it was the first and last day to see The Brave Little Sapling. So I asked the dwarf to come see it since he was the resident who liked this movie that I had the lowest relationship with. That night, I worked on crafting towards my completionist goals and did some decorating in the back room. Ginger was finally an interactive bab on the first day of summer, and Pierre was heading with his family for a little island daycation, which stressed me out a bit, until I saw that he left the money box out again so that I could still make my summer seed purchases. Thank goodness. I spent that afternoon setting up summer crops around my Junimo friends, taking a quick break to see the new season's movie feature with the lovely Sandy. While at the movies, I'd snagged a few trees from the crane game to give Haley even more foliage for her photo area, then finished planting and watering for the rest of the night. The next day, I took care of farm chores before accepting a quest to bring 80 hardwood to Robin for a project. Later, I headed to the island and while there, crafted the ostrich incubator that might be useful if I ever managed to find an ostrich egg. I was missing a couple journal scraps, the next of which would give me the location of a walnut dig spot that also happened to contain an ostrich egg. According to the wiki, there's an 8% chance for a note to be found in place of trash while fishing. So I took to the Gourmand's Cave for several hours in the hopes of snagging the elusive journal scrap. I spent most of day 143 on the island panning, searching for artifact spots, and fishing up mostly trash. Once back in the valley that night, I headed to the secret woods to harvest some of the hardwood requested by Robin, and welcome in Baba's second baby sheep, who I named Have-Wool. The next day, it was raining in the valley, and my heart situation was progressing nicely. Speaking of heart situations, I found Bingo up in Ginger's room, spending time with her. So cute. Deciding to work on my Noah's Ark bingo spot a bit, I purchased Jessica Rabbit to keep Roger company. I gave Jas a loved gift of plum pudding for her birthday, then dropped by the sewers to chat with Krobus and attempt to fish up the mutant carp. It took a few hours, but I finally reeled him in. Since my fishing buff was still active, I spent most of that evening fishing in the ocean. I'd picked up Key's Hungry quest and thought day 145 might be a good day to attempt it, so I warped over to the desert bright and early, and nearly died after dropping 13 levels into the waiting jaws of a serpent. Yeah, maybe I'll just work on my fishing goals and reel up the scorpion carp instead. Back at home, I worked on cooking new recipes after having taken care of the usual farm chores. On the first summer Saturday, a new chicken named Jaeger hatched, and I set a dino egg to incubate in its place. When I visited the island that day, I caught Leo in a sad mood, so I gave him a duck feather in the hopes it might cheer him up, then became sad myself in the volcano for the remainder of the evening, in the seemingly never-ending hunt for walnuts. Sunday morning, I made poi to share with Leo, and the parrot in his hut let me know I needed to head back into the volcano if I wanted more of those missing walnuts. So back in I headed, then swiftly changed my mind, deciding that my time would be best spent continuing to search for the ostrich-bearing journal scrap. Later, I collected the last pieces of hardwood needed for Robin's quest, and raced over to her house to drop them off, completing the quest in the nick of time. It was Gus's birthday on the 8th of summer, so I brought him his customary birthday orange, then fished up the legendary crimson fish off the Eastern Ocean Pier, before snagging a new quest off the special orders board. Well, I say new, but it was actually a retry of the prismatic jelly hunt. Next, I stopped into Robin's and saw the marvelous bed she'd crafted with the hardwood I'd supplied, and finished off the night with a search through the mines for a special slime, but finding mostly sprites instead. Day 149 was a wine day, so I refilled my kegs with strawberries, and later headed to the mine, this time with my helm on, so you know I really meant to find that jelly. But I don't think I'm ready for that jelly, so I headed home for the night. We're halfway through the bingo challenge, so let's take a look at our progress so far. We need to make a bit over 100,000 gold to reach 1 million earned. We still need a level in combat. Our lowest hearts is with Leo at 4. We have 4 items left to ship, 5 fish left to catch, and we are closing in on the museum collection. That morning, I loaded up on loved gifts and headed out through the rain, making sure to bring Maru a strawberry for her birthday, before putting on my official mine-diving helmet to continue the search for that pesky prismatic slime. I found him fairly quickly, trying to hide in a corner on floor 57. Since I was already at the mines, I thought I should work on fishing completion, so I started up on floor 100, but all I was catching was trash, so I dropped down to floor 60 to catch an ice pip, then 20 for a stonefish. I would try to fish up the lava eel at the volcano later on, while simultaneously hunting for the journal scrap needed for the ostrich egg. That night, I brought the wizard a mushroom and the prismatic jelly. I'd been neglecting the normal request board, so I only just now earned the gopher achievement for completing 10 requests. The wizard sent me the recipe for monster musk that next morning. I'd shipped off a cabbage and aged roe the night before, meaning I only had the mango and ostrich egg left for shipping completion. And catching the dorado while waiting for the luau meant I was only missing the angler and the lava eel for fishing completion. We are getting so close on these goals. Once at the luau, I threw a starfruit into the vat, earning the best reaction possible from the mayor. Look at that lovely friendship game. I hadn't been to the island in a few days, so a lot of my crops were ready to harvest. After I took care of that, I stopped by to give Leo a snack. Then made my way to the volcano summit to fish for the lava eel, trash that I hoped would convert to journal scraps, and apparently this lovely physics painting. It didn't take long before I caught my first lava eel. Now only the legendary angler, who'd be available in fall, was left for fishing. I gave up on finding the journal scrap after some mocking from the lava monkeys, spending the rest of the day looking for walnuts inside the volcano dungeon. Somehow Evelyn knew I'd be on the island day 153 as I woke up to some cookies in the mail, then hung out on the island until it was tourist time. But Gus was not among the passengers, so I headed home and ran into a dark, dank, and dreamy heart scene with Sebastian. Back home, I hung the physics painting in Ginger's room and gave her a snuggle. Oh, and Haley made me a muffin. Rumor has it it's always raining on Alex's birthday, and today proved to be no different. So I interrupted his workout to gift him a complete breakfast at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, though I guess it's never a bad time for breakfast. Then I invited the dwarf to come see Journey of the Prairie King. He seemed to have a great time. That night, I checked in on the Monster Slayer goals and saw I was getting pretty close on a few of the goals. Ginger was on the move the next morning, though I have to admit she did startle me a bit, crawling across the floor like a little caterpillar. It had been a few days since I'd been inside the cube, so the eggs were really starting to pile up. And my mango tree had also finished growing a few days ago, so I shipped one of the mangoes, leaving only the ostrich egg to ship, which I've still yet to find. I had a shocking encounter with Maru that afternoon, then spent the evening doing farm chores until bedtime. On day 155, Kent requested I bring a starfruit for him to gift Jody, and I was so excited at the opportunity to raise my friendship with Kent that I raced over to their house, but of course it was too early to enter. So while I waited, I ran over to the special orders board and picked up the tropical fish quest from Willie, since I still had some fishing to do on the island while looking for journal scrap number 10. I then dropped the starfruit off at Kent's, bumping us up to an impressive 8 heart, before spending the day fishing on the island. I did not catch the journal scrap while fishing, but lo and behold, this glorious tiger slime dropped it while I was in the volcano later that night. I raced out of the volcano to collect my prize and considered sending it through the shipping bin since it was the last item I had left to ship, but thought better of it. After doing a little math, I felt I had enough time for this ostrich to hatch and lay an egg well before the 200 days were up. And I also needed an ostrich for the tier 2 animal spot, so I placed both the incubator and the egg in the barn once I arrived home that night. On day 156, I checked the barn to make sure I hadn't dreamt up the ostrich egg, and sure enough, it was there. Also, there was a full shed of wine. I say full, but I know I actually had space for another row of kegs. So after I'd collected all the wine, I moved around some kegs to make room for the back row. That's better. I still needed to catch a few fish for Willie, so I made my way back to the island, and was rudely booted from the Pirate's Cove mid-fishing. But I managed to haul in all the lionfish and stingray needed for the quest before heading home that night. The next day, Sandy sent me a letter in the mail, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think anyone else sends letters on lined paper that's been ripped from a folder. It's kind of adorable. So I took her advice and got ready to head for the— whoops, I did not mean to use that yet. Once I got my bearings, I took to the mines, but I was pretty low on supplies, so I did a lot of juking while looking for ladders. See, look at all those jukes. Even without a full loadout, I made it to floor 64 before making my way out of the mine. Day 158, I headed straight away to Ginger Island to continue work on the tropical fish quest, and yes, that out-of-reach panning spot taunted me for quite some time. I fished the final fish that afternoon, just as my tackle wore out, then made it back to the farm to welcome in my new lizard, Zeke. The tropical fish quest paid off in a big fish tank way, so I placed a few of the legendary fish into the new deluxe tank and moved about some others. Vincent and I had a laugh about monsters that afternoon. Then I stopped into the saloon and saw that Gus had his away box out, meaning I could finally catch Gus manning the beach resort. I didn't need the gold quality wine for the missing bundle anymore, but I snagged up the tropical curry recipe needed for cooking completion. And can we just appreciate my gold balance for a minute? I think Clint may have been hanging out with Abigail recently because he told me he was hungry and then I gave him a topaz and, well, that evening I caught Demetrius on his way to the saloon to gift him a birthday strawberry. Later I took to the mines to farm monsters and ore. On day 160, I was on a mission to raise friendships, so I loaded up my pack and set out. Cue the gift-giving montage. Somewhere in there, I also asked Clint to upgrade my axe to iridium, purchased 2 auto-grabbers and a pig named Waggly from Marnie, and went to see Journey of the Prairie King with Sandy. The Queen of Sauce made my wife somewhat of a celebrity the next morning by highlighting her pink cake recipe request on her Sunday morning show. After visiting with Krobus in the sewers, I asked the Statue of Uncertainty to reset my foraging profession, then put on my helmet and spent the night testing how well Monster Musk works. And I'd say it worked fairly well because I completed the bat goal a few hours later, then the Dust Sprite goal a couple of hours after that. I barely missed picking up my burglar's ring from the Adventurers Guild, so I'd have to come collect my prize on a later day. Overnight, I reset my foraging profession to Forester for increased wood, and was surprised to see I'd leveled up combat to become a brute. My axe was ready the next morning, and combining that with the Forester perk, I was hoping to find a certain resource rush request on a special order board. But before I checked the board, I ran over to gift the dwarf a topaz for his birthday. And now for the moment of truth. There's no wood gathering request. So I picked the Juicy Bugs request from Willie and hoped I would actually complete it this time. Then I grabbed my iridium axe from Clint and commenced a day of deforestation. On day 163, Sandy sent me another cute note with some tomka soup, and I made a little more keg progress in my second shed. Later that day, I stopped in to snag my lovely burglar's ring, and checked on the remaining eradication goals. First page is looking pretty good, but whoops, let's not look too closely at the second page. The rest of that night, I worked on collecting bug meat for Willie with the help of my helm and some musky perfume. Sam stopped by that next rainy Wednesday morning, asking me to meet him at the bus stop at 4. But today was going to be a bit of a doozy, so Sam might have to wait on me like I'd done last year for his birthday. That morning, I decided to switch over the strawberry wine to blueberry, then dropped off the bug meat to Willie's bin. And the reward money for that pushed me over 1 million gold earned. I wanted to celebrate with a movie, so I invited Leo to catch a film as he had the lowest hearts. And while on the island, I picked up Key's prismatic Grange quest, then found out that Leo was ready to say goodbye to island life to come live in Pelican Town. It was 5:30 as I was making my way home, so I was rather shocked to see that half the town had been waiting for me to arrive at the bus stop in the rain since 4. Sorry everyone. After that show, I headed off to catch another show, this time The Prairie King with Leo. And yes, this is like the 3rd time I've seen this film, but it's such a good way to raise relationship points. I finished up the night decorating the house with a few more pieces I'd snagged from the crane game, but Leo's bird family showed me up on the decoration skills as they designed a complete treehouse for Leo that night. Oh, and I updated my foraging skill back to botanist as I was sick of having multiple stacks of the same item in my inventory. I was intent on finally finishing a key quest, so I gathered up the materials needed for the colorful Grange. Then found my first ostrich egg had hatched, so now I have every animal type available for this challenge. Welcome in Ollie the Ostrich. I brought Lewis his requested slip oil, and ran into a melancholy heart scene with Alex. That was immediately replaced by an uncomfortable scene with Willie and the bug meat I'd collected for him. Then I surprised Elliot while he was writing with a suggestion of a mystery novel, because who doesn't like a good mystery? By the way, does anyone else get major Beauty and the Beast vibes from the rose in this scene? After the plethora of cutscenes, I headed to Ginger Island to drop off my Rainbow Grange for key, and a quick check showed I still had 43% to go to reach perfection, so I took to the mines for a little more walnut hunting the rest of the night. On the final Friday of summer, there was an egg ready to hatch, but my coop was full. Luckily, one of the ducks had dropped a feather that would be a perfect gift for Leo's birthday today. I thought I might also invite Leo to the movies for his birthday, so I grabbed a few tickets, but he declined my invitation, which was fine because the birthday gift had already bumped us up to 10 hearts. I then asked Kent if he would go catch a flick, but he said no as well. Feeling a bit rejected, I headed off to bed before midnight, which I think may have been the earliest bedtime this entire run. The next day, I mostly ran about the farm crafting missing items, only taking a break that afternoon to see Robin about a coop for my excess poultry. On the final day of summer, I was fortunate enough to witness a truffle magic trick, and since it was Sunday, I loaded up on items for the start of the gifting week. Cue the second gift-giving montage of the series. All the gifting meant I was 4 hearts away from full hearts perfection. While running about town, I also spent a disturbing amount of gold on summer seeds as I was under the delusion that I would be planting them on Ginger Island in the coming weeks. That night, I picked up a few souvenirs from the Moonlight Jellies Festival for Ginger, as she was still a touch too young to join Haley and me out on the dock as the jellies danced about in the moonlight. Day 169 was the beginning of fall, so I first took stock of the fall seeds already in my chest, then picked up a few hundred more at Pierre's, and spent the rest of the day planting and watering and planting. Now, before we get into Tuesday's event, I should let you know that day 170 was brought to you by the number 2 and the letter A. You'll see what I mean. After doing some farm chores, I double-checked my heart situation. I still had 4 hearts left to go, and it was Penny's birthday, so I prepared myself for another day of gift giving. The gift I gave the wizard was not good enough to reach 10 hearts, so I invited him to come see a movie with me later that day. Then I gifted the tom kha soup I'd set aside for Penny's birthday to... Oh no, can we see that again in slow motion? How could I possibly confuse these 2 ladies? But there it is. Absolutely astounding gameplay. I continued hauling about gifts, blissfully unaware of my blunder, and managed to reach 10 hearts with Krobus, then with Kent, and finally George, who was the last on my gift-giving list for the day. I checked the special orders board and was excited to see Robin's resource rush, but disappointed because she was looking for stone instead of wood. I took the quest anyways, but thought it unlikely I'd do as requested. Then took a quick stop to pick up another key quest. I'd be doing the Prismatic Grange quest for the second time. But first it was time to see the Autumn Flick Mysterium with the wizard in the hopes of maxing out this final relationship. The movie fit in with the spooky season, and the wizard was certainly enjoying it. Afterwards, I was at max hearts with all of the villagers. What an affectionate achievement. But wait, there's more. Because next I went fishing and reeled in my final fish, the legendary angler. For those of you keeping score at home, that is 2 bingo spots achieved in a single day. And that concludes the day brought to you by the letter A and the number 2. Oh, and a bonus points if you notice that this was the second day of fall or autumn in year 2. The next morning, Willie sent me my 6th star drop, and I was filled with thoughts of bingo. I thought I should work on monster slaying goals and collecting stones, so I donned my helmet and headed into the mines, switching later to bombing the quarry for additional stone. The next day, I thought I should work on monster slaying goals and collecting stones, for a bit of deja vu. But also, I still needed to gather another 600 stones, so I hung out in the mines that entire day. On day 173, I made the tough decision to place the first egg Ollie laid into the incubator instead of shipping it to complete the shipping progress. And hear me out, it's because I also had a Noah's Ark bingo spot that would be complete once I had 2 of every animal. I finally remembered I could buy an iridium sprinkler from Krobus on Fridays, so I did. Then it was back to the mines on the hunt for stone. Around 10 o'clock that night, I had mined the final piece. I was back home a bit early, so I rummaged through my chest for the items needed to complete the prismatic range the next day. I headed to Ginger Island that next morning and went directly to the Walnut Room to collect my key gems, with which I bought my first ever horse flute. So now Winnie can join me on the island. Gus was visiting the island again today, which was fortunate because I had a lobster he'd requested on me. I didn't do too much else on day 174 except started a go chest in case a Skull Cavern run beckoned me. The next morning, I used my purchased iridium sprinkler to fill out the Junimo Hut area. And I had been neglecting my greenhouse, so it was bursting with berries to harvest. It was Sunday, so I also went to trade in my excess jade for staircases, before heading to the mines to continue slaying those monsters. Another Monday meant I had another shot at picking up those all-important crafting recipe quests, like Gunther's Fragments of the Past quest, tasking me with gathering bone fragments. In the Walnut Room, I contemplated picking up the Granger quest for the third time in a row, but decided the Danger in the Deep quest might be more beneficial. On the way back to the valley, I hit a bit of a traffic jam, but it cleared up pretty swiftly. And then I was on my way to the mines. Oh right, the lift's out. Time to helm dive the mine one ladder at a time. I made it to level 15 before I decided to head home for the night. The next day, Kent sent me some explosives in the mail, and Lewis reminded me I'd need to gather 9 items for the Stardew Valley Fair Grange next week. Then I dove helm first back into the mines, where I stayed until I reached the lovely level 45, where I called it for the night, because I had kegs that needed restocking back at home. Checking my journal the next morning, I saw that I was about a third of the way through both the key quest and Gunther's request, so I was back to the mines yet again, where I made it to level 81 before deciding to head home. Ironically, both quests I was working on were around 2/3 complete that next day, so I figured another day in the mines just might do it for both. And though I was right about Danger Mine's completion, I hadn't gotten a single piece of bone from the last 40 levels of the mine, so completion of that task would have to wait for another day. On day 180, Ollie joined me in the barn to show me she'd laid another egg, and I was out of reason to procrastinate completing the shipping achievement, so of course, I headed to Ginger Island in search of bone fragments, with the ostrich egg still in my pack. I did manage to notice I still had the egg on me and tossed it in the Island Hut shipping bin, but I'm going to hold off on marking the bingo spot until I see that wonderful achievement appear. I spent the remainder of the evening in the volcano on the hunt for the final 4 walnuts. Bingo! With completion of the shipping achievement, we have officially reached bingo on day 181. I'd managed to achieve bingo on day 100 in the last series, but for this video, I technically had 20 days left. I was a bit miffed I hadn't thought to collect 50 hats so I could get a double bingo in one go. And that got me thinking, how many bingos could I get in these 200 days? Without jumping ahead, let me know in the comments how many times you think I completed a bingo on this card by the end of day 200. I wanted to finish up Gunther's request, and after clearing out all the bone nodes at the dig site, I was at 99 fragments collected. So I took to the quarry mines, where I discovered that haunted skulls do not, in fact, drop bone fragments, which is when I headed to the skeleton level of the regular mine and made short work of collecting the final fragment. After a quick reading of Elliot's book that absolutely everyone stuck around for, I dropped off the 100 bone fragments along with another artifact for the museum collection. Ginger was totting about that next morning. I received the bone meal recipe from Gunther, and Sandy sent me yet another bowl of soup. Since I hadn't done any decorating in my house, I decided to pick up the catalog from Pierre and furniture catalog from Robin. I also moved the empty coop down below the animal fencing, upgrading it to a big coop, and did some home renovations while at Robin. Then I spent a ridiculously long time, real and in-game, trying to decorate. Trying being the operative word. Thankfully, Haley reminded me I needed to gather items for the Grange display the next morning. While doing farm chores, I remembered to move my dinos to the new coop, so now they were free-range lizards. I welcomed a new ostrich Folly, and completely forgot that there was an egg waiting to hatch in the main coop. Instead, I picked up Pierre's prime produce request, headed to the desert to give Sandy a birthday flower, trade Omni Geodes for artifact troves, and plant a forest load of trees. Then made my way to Ginger Island and picked up quite possibly the meanest quest in the game. You'll see what I mean. I also threw down a batch of tree seeds outside the walnut room for good measure. Around midnight, I remembered there was an egg waiting to hatch in the coop, and I called my new bird Big. The next morning was shed wine time, one of which I added to a collection of nice things before heading off to the fair, where I set up my display and then displayed a feat of strength, or timing. This year, I increased my rating over last year by 6, so once again, I took home top prize. Before heading home for the night, can we just take a minute to look at how adorable Ginger is running about the fair? I'd need to harvest 25 gold quality vegetables for Pierre's quest, so the next morning, I asked the Junimos to take the next few days off. Next, I stopped by Robin's for the final upgrade of the Dino's coop, then ran over to see what Clint could find me for the museum collection. I was able to donate 2 items to the museum, leaving only the ancient sword and prehistoric skull to complete the collection. The rest of the day, I tried to work out the best way to collect key beans, since I needed to grow 500 fruit over the next dozen days. I decided deforestation was the winner, since I could use all the wood I could get. My cute little hat rack was up and about when I woke up on day 186, so after saying good morning, I popped outside to sprinkle a little deluxe speed grow on some key beans. And since I really wanted to grow the 500 key fruit, I headed to the desert and bought more deluxe speed grow from Sandy since she had it in stock on Thursdays. Then I asked the Statue of Uncertainty to reset my farming skills, and continued collecting and planting key beans for the rest of the day. For my farming profession reset that night, I selected Agriculturalist for faster crops. The next morning, I received a letter from Pam requesting a battery, and since it was Friday, I went to purchase an iridium sprinkler from Krobus. Then spent the day in search of those cheeky key beans, taking a quick detour into the quarry mines to try for the prehistoric skull. I also reset my fishing profession to pirate that night, in the hopes of catching more key beans and artifact-bearing chests. The first of the key fruit had grown the next day, and they were a bit frightening. So I spent the day propagating and planting the creepy beans, before scouring the valley for even more. I must admit, I'm starting to regret picking up this quest. Luckily, it was showering on Sunday because today was going to be lather, rinse, repeat with the key beans. Though I did need to take a break to fish at the ocean for some eels needed for recipes. Once back home that night, I cooked up a few dishes, leaving only the fried calamari and fiddlehead risotto as the available recipes left to cook within 200 game days. And today in Stardew, I learned that Haley wanted me to get the full house achievement before the end of the year. So we're adopting another baby. I believe the second child is the opposite gender of the first, so let me know a good name for Ginger's little brother. The next day, I bulked up my key bean proliferation with the addition of 4 seed makers. I'd gotten the grow time of the fruit down to 2 days with a combination of fertilizer and profession perks. But it was going to be a race to the finish if I wanted the full 500 fruit shipped. It was Monday, so I stopped by the special orders board, but decided not to take on either request. Then I swung by the Walnut Room and picked up the Junimo Cart quest for a bit of a laugh. Though the joke's on me because I didn't even touch the game once in the 7 days. Later that night, I went into the volcano in search of walnuts and beans and other things. On day 191, I had 6 days left for the 500 fruit, so I got to picking and seeding immediately that morning, and expanded my key crops well into the evening. The next day was more of the same, planting and harvesting and harvesting and planting. But the next day was different, because I took a quick break from planting to buy more speed grow from Sandy. These key gems had better be worth it. I had a bit of a humor reprieve from the stress of the key fruit crops when Pam sent me a battery on day 194. You know, the item she had requested I bring to her. Oh, Pam. After I spent most of the day on my final key crop expansion, I took another trip to the quarry mine still in search of the prehistoric skull, one of my 2 remaining artifacts for the museum. There were only 2 days left for the key fruit quest, so I collected the ripened fruit and hoped that I'd planted enough the previous day. Though the missed speed grow spot in this batch was not a good sign. I managed to get myself stuck behind Winnie in a bush on my way to see the Hat Mouse, but I figured it out eventually and bought as many hats as I could fit in my pack to start working towards the 50 hat collection bingo spot. Later, I took a second trip for hats and nearly blocked myself out again. You'd think I'd learn. After these new hats were stored, I had 30 unique hats in my dresser. Then I began crafting hats on the sewing machine, starting first with that mischievous key fruit and praying that I didn't turn up 1 fruit short the next day. In an attempt to snazz up my Spirit's Eve garb, I donned my new fashion hat and traded Winnie my garbage hat for the skull mask in case I wanted to dress up as a skelly at the festival. I bought the jack-o'-lantern recipe I'd skipped out on last year, and found my way through the maze as a spooky, scary skeleton. Though I wish I had brought my other fedora so that Ginger and I could be in matching costumes. There's always next year, I suppose. It was the final day of fall, which meant I would be learning the last cooking recipe for these 100 days, fiddlehead risotto. I made the risotto immediately, so by my calculation, I only needed to catch a squid come winter, and I would be able to cook the last recipe for the bingo spot. As I headed outside, the rain fell heavy on my shoulders as I prepared to harvest the remaining key fruit for the quest. Remember how I was worried I might be one short from making that hat? Well, turns out I wasn't one short. I was 21 short. There are no words. To make myself feel better, I set some of the key fruit to become wine and jam, then headed into town and sold the rest to Pierre for a whopping 477 gold. Oh well, at least Mr. Key won't be getting them for his stupid quest. Something had to go right for me today, so I headed again to the quarry mines to kill haunted skulls, and managed to get the prehistoric skull. Now only the ancient sword to go for both the museum collection and the 7 star drop spot. It was raining and I wanted to cook more spicy eel, so I hung out on the dock fishing the night away. Winter 1st, year 2, and we are closing in swiftly on 200 days. That morning I made a hat that was actually more disturbing than the key fruit hat. Then I made more clothes with anything else I had laying about and placed them in the dresser. I'm fairly certain I have over the 50 hats needed for the bingo spot at this point, but I will be doing a final count on the last day of the challenge, so we'll wait until then to check. My only missing artifact was the ancient sword, so I checked for artifact spots in the mountain. Then I snagged a fishing quest from the orders board and asked Clint to open some troves, but the sword was not inside any of them. Next, I gave Pam the battery she'd mailed me the other day, before heading to the island to check the perfection tracker. At some point, I had collected all of the walnuts, and I'm not sure when it was, so we'll just mark that off now. I picked the Keys Cuisine quest, so I see a lot of cooking in my future. And this would include my final cooking recipe for the bingo spot, so I headed back to the valley to fish up a lovely squid or two. I hate to admit, but I forgot it was Krobus' birthday until it was rather late, so I bought a void egg from him to gift him, and that smile was worth the 5,000 gold. On day 198, the cask wine was ready, and I had switched my farming profession back to artisan, so tonight should be a great payday. I was only missing the year 2 Queen of Sauce recipes, so after I made my fried calamari, I could check the cooking spot off my bingo card. And since I was already cooking, I started to work on the key quest by cooking over 100 tropical curry. Then, while out looking for artifact spots in the mountains, I shimmy searched up my luckiest haul ever as it contained not only a diamond, but a lucky ring. That night was spent fishing on Ginger Island in the hopes of finding the final artifact in a treasure chest, which I finally did! That day I'd cooked so much that my key quest sales actually made more than the wine. I crafted up even more clothes on day 199 to feed my sewing addiction, then sold one of my excess sheep so there would be enough space in the barn for the additional brown and white cows needed for the Noah's Ark bingo spot. I did the same in the coop with one of the brown chickens, as I would need another blue and white in their place. Then raced over to the museum with my fingers crossed that I hadn't missed any donations. And I hadn't, as we earned the complete collection achievement. As reward, I received the 7th and final star drop. And now for the livestock montage. Welcome in Cheese, Ray, Belle, and Moon. I spent the rest of the day cooking for Key's quest, and while picking up supplies at Pierre's, I noticed he had almost 300 of the key fruit I sold him in stock. Here's hoping I get the key fruit quest again soon so that I can buy them back and have a big leg up on that challenge. After the previous night's shipment, I have a little over 5,000 worth of cuisine left to cook, but I have 11 days, so that will not be the focus of this final day. No, today, I think I will finally tackle my greatest nemesis, Gus was heading to the island, so I would have the saloon to myself. I'd have 4 bingo rows completed if I could pull this off, so I psyched myself up the best I could. Then, yeah, this isn't happening. At least no one was here to witness my embarrassment. I spent the rest of the day cleaning up another of my embarrassments, the state of my house. Haley and I will no longer be sleeping in the living room as I set us up with a proper bedroom. And I managed to get a 4th bingo row after all, as a quick count found I had 53 unique hats. 54 if you count the copper pan. Well, the 200 days are officially over, and I've got to say, I'm rather proud of how much we were able to accomplish. We reached 73% completion on the perfection tracker, though most of the remaining goals require a lot of gold to achieve. We'd earned almost 2 million gold by the end of 200 days, but I know I'm not the best at profit optimization, so it could take me a few years in-game to earn the 13 million needed for the obelisks and clock combined if I'm not careful. Anyhow, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye!